Good morning, everybody, and happy April, Eagles fans, and welcome on in to another episode of Eye on the Eagles, your all-access pass to all things Avila Athletics. I'm Sports Information Director Tim Hackett. Our first guest on this April the 1st, Tyler Bredehoeft, head men's basketball coach. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Appreciate it, Tim. Thanks for having me.
As always, pleasure to see you, and congratulations are in order for you as you officially complete your first season as our head coach. It's a couple of weeks since the end of the season at this point, but how are you feeling now that your first season as our head coach is officially in the books?
Yeah, just going through player meetings and staff meetings and evaluating film and just kind of recapping within our office of how the season went and areas we want to continue down and how we want to change certain things, and just kind of a just reflection period, for us. So it was a interesting year. We learned quite a bit about ourselves, and we had a lot of new guys that first time playing in the league, first time being at Avila. So I think a lot of our guys kind of now at least have the expectation and know what competition is going to be like within the league every Wednesday, Saturday, and got a good base where we're at right now, and we need to just keep building with it.
I know it's hard to always see a lot of stuff when you are in it, when you're in the thick of playing 2 or 3 games per week, but now that you have the opportunity to reflect a little bit, you said it's a reflection period for you and for your staff. What are some of the things that you're learning? What are some of the conclusions that you drew?
Yeah, we got to be able to score the ball better this next year. We were at 64 points a game this season. That's just tough to win games if you're not getting around that 70 mark, unless you just have an elite offense, like Houston. But then you watch Houston and they can only score 51 points in a game and they lose 55-51. So at the end of the day, you got to put the ball in the basket. You got to have some guys that can score the ball and do it at an efficient level. So that's kind of a big focus of our recruitment here as we go into this big push in the recruitment season, is trying to find a couple guys that can put the ball in the basket for us and keep us going in the direction we want to go with this program.
This is kind of a big picture question. It's not meant to be a leading question, but now that you have been in this league and you've been part of this region before, as we know, but now that you've been in the KCAC for a full year, you've seen all the teams, you've seen what we can do. What are your expectations moving forward? I mean, it's not as easy to say, we're going to quadruple our win total into next season or whatever like that, but what do you think is the future for this team in the conference?
Yeah, I don't try not to get too long-sighted on stuff. We just want to continue to build with the basics. Good repetitions in practice, good habits, setting expectations of what we're trying to do daily. Try not to focus too far out on what success looks like for us, as long as we handle what we need to do on a daily basis and get guys in here that believe in it and want to work and don't want to make excuses for stuff. If we can do that and get a group that's bought into doing that, we'll just keep progressing each day by day. So but to give you an answer, hopefully our non-conference schedule is going to look a lot different next year. We've only played two non-con games and we went 1-1. This next year we'll have 6 total non-conference games. So hopefully we'll be able to build a little bit momentum there in the preseason and into a conference play. So expectations I'd hope to be somewhere around that. Get to that 10-win mark, and there's always opportunity to be 4, maybe 3 or 4 games above that. But non-conference game will look a little bit different. We played the 25th toughest schedule in the NAIA this year, and that did not factor in any of our Division II or
it doesn't
Division
even
I
factor
games.
any of those games.
Yeah, so we 25th in the country just in the games we played alone.
I didn't realize that.
And then you add in our 4 Division II games and our 2 Division I games, and we'll probably played one of the toughest schedules in the country.
Would have to imagine, yeah.
So, there's stuff to build on like that, but at the end of the day, you got to win the game. It's nice to kind of know that all right, well, we're playing good competition and we're competing, but at the end of the day, you win games, you lose games. So we got to find a way to be on some of the other sides of winning some games.
One of the things that I think we talk a lot about this show, on this show with just about every coach, is that idea. I think kind of the balance that you have to strike as a coach and as a program between, if you will, and I'll just use these terms loosely, scheduling up and playing teams that you know are going to be difficult, and if you really think about it, they're going to be a challenge for you to win, or scheduling down and playing against teams where you're going to go in thinking we should win this game easily, versus, of course, the third part of that equation is playing against a team that is somewhat similar to you, where it's more or less a toss-up as to who's going to win. So you guys played, consciously or not, again, I realize not all of this was your choice. A lot of it was built before you, but you played a lot of very difficult teams that were quote-unquote better, or at least finished with better records. So we've talked with a lot of our coaches on this show over the course of this year about the benefit to that, but I'm always kind of looking at it as, and I'm certainly no coach, as you know, but looking at it from the other side of kind of what you just hinted at, that if we're playing games against either teams that are, equivalent or similar to us, or perhaps lower than us, if we win some of those games, does that make us feel better going forward, rather than knowing, all right, we challenged ourselves against a really, really good team like Columbia, to name just one NAIA school that you guys played in the start of the season this past year, knowing that was going to be a tough game, ended up losing. Is there a benefit, I guess my question is, to playing more teams that you think we're close or even to or better than, rather than playing mostly teams that we think are better than us and just trying to challenge ourselves?
There's a good balance. I think the biggest thing as a coach, you have to understand your team, or the guys you got coming in, or who you're losing. I think if you're a well-established team, or you're coming off a really good season, you have returning most of those players. I think those are teams you like to try to challenge early in the year and see how they're going to respond, and then you can kind of build from there. I think with where we're at with the program and the guys that we have, that was probably just too big of a jump right away with us. We hadn't built any chemistry. We hadn't really built an identity of who we were. We didn't. Our leaders weren't really established, and we're throwing into games where we're hitting a lot of adversity in those games where we're overmatched, and we just didn't have the building blocks in place to be able to handle some of those games. So I think it's different for each team. I don't think it was quite us last year. I think this year needs to be a little bit more of a balance. We'll have a few of those games in there where we're challenged, and we'll handle hit some adversity, and we'll see how we handle it. And there's a few games where I think we're a little bit more evenly matched, and have an opportunity to kind of prove ourselves, and hopefully pick up a few wins. So it's such a fine balance, and the biggest thing, you just have to know you got to know your players, and you have to know your team really well to kind of understand and know if they're going to be able to handle those situations. And we were just so new, we didn't know if we were going to, going into this season. It was, hey, maybe we do, maybe we don't. We're kind of uncertain. So this year we'll proceed a little bit more cautious with the non-conference scheduling, and hopefully we have a good year this next year, and those tough games help us, and some of those middle of the road evenly matched games we can win and build some momentum from that. Have a good year, and then maybe the following year is where you try to challenge yourself a little bit more in the non-con. So if you look at our league and how many teams we're getting into the national tournament, and how we're getting teams in the national tournament, our strength of schedule is a huge piece of what we're doing. You even look at the Division I, the NCAA tournament. Michigan State only gets into the tournament because of how tough of a schedule they play. They had 18 wins, I think, and got into the tournament. But it just came down to their non-conference schedule and how tough of a schedule they played in, also in the Big Ten too. And you look at our conference in the NAIA, it's the same thing. Like St. Mary's Peru State from not winning the Hart tournament to getting into the national tournament, us getting 5 teams in. So playing tough schedule is being rewarded more now than ever. We're just not quite to a point where I think that's going to benefit us long term. Sure. We need to build a little bit of momentum. We need to build some confidence with some of our non-conference stuff. But every level all the way up to Division I is rewarding teams that are playing tough schedules.
I'm glad you brought up the national tournament, because that's where I was going next, and you've kind of hinted at your answer to this already, but how much do you pay attention to or tap into postseason? Even though we weren't in it this year, there's a lot of high-level basketball even played locally over the last couple of weeks. So how much did you follow the KCAC tournament, NAIA tournament, Division I, Division II, so on, NIT, if people still watch that? How much do you watch postseason basketball, especially at our level, to try to learn some things that you can apply to what we do?
You're trying to you're watching stuff to either find new ideas or find wrinkles in offenses that you run or defenses that you run. You're also looking at really good teams and trying to figure out, well, how do they win, or why do they win? So you, as a coach, you're always kind of watching that stuff and trying to pull a little bit of pieces here and there from different teams. If you look at the 4 teams that are in the Final Four, NC State kind of plays through their post. Obviously, Purdue plays through their post. UConn is very balanced on what they're trying to do, but they got a big guy that they like to play through. And Alabama's really the one team that doesn't necessarily have a big that they play through, but they shoot a lot of threes. And if they're hitting a lot of threes on those nights, they're tough to beat. That's the one good equalizer for a forward, is to be able to hit a bunch of shots from the outside.
It's kind of the modern world, right?
Yeah. So, but everybody thinks modern basketball, shoot a bunch of threes, get up and down pretty quick. But then you look at 3 of the top 4 teams there in the Final Four, and they're all playing through the inside. So, having a good forward can kind of change how you want to play games. And the couple years I was at Rock Valley, we always had a pretty good forward that we played through. We were always very balanced scoring wise. So, watching that, it's watching the games in the postseason is the forward play is still alive, and you got to have good forwards, or you just got to have really good, like Alabama, really good guards that can really fill it up and play with good tempo. And then they basically try to eliminate any of the half court post play that they have to deal with. So. Watch it quite a bit and taking bits and pieces, and I tell our assistants all the time, I'm like, hey, who such and such team is running, they're running the same actions that we're running, and they're getting good looks, and watch for the tempo that they're playing with, or the pace that they play with. And there's just different things there. I'm like, hey, the stuff we're running works. We've got to keep repping it. We got to get some guys that maybe it fits their style a little bit better, and just keep plugging away.
I think that proves to me that there is no one-size-fits-all, certainly not at the college level. And I'm just, while we were talking about this, I was going through, the top teams in our conference this year. You mentioned we had 4 KCAC teams make the national tournament, which is impressive, full stop. But all of those 4 teams are built differently. They've all got different positions that are their best players, and I think you could make, an argument for all 4 of those teams that they don't have one true best player. They've got 1 or 2 guys that you could call their best player, at least a 1A, 1B type of thing. So for me, that proves, and again, I don't have nearly the X's and O's knowledge that you do, but that proves to me that there are a lot of different ways to build a team, a lot of different ways to have success, and a lot of different ways to look and be good. So for me, I think that is encouraging, because like you said, it's not all just about let's shoot threes, let's get back and try to guard half court. That's a lot of what the game is now. We can certainly all we can all see that's proved, but there's more to it than that, and there's a lot of versatility and there's a lot of nuance to it, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yep. Yeah, it's just, you watch it, different teams are just trying to pick apart mismatches, and you look at our 4 teams in the KCAC that made it, and Evangel's just very consistent 1 through 5, and it's their actions are tough to guard, and it could be any guy any night going off and giving them a boost. And then Kansas Wesleyan's got 2 really good players, and then some role guys that step up when they need to. And Southwestern's the same way. They got 2 really good players, and they have role guys that step up and do different things. And then you look at Oklahoma Wesleyan, and they got a kind of a big man that anchors at least their offense, defense. When they need a bucket, they can go to him, and then they have a really good guard play, and they defend really well. So it's just about finding mismatches. I'm sure when those teams are game planning for each other, they're thinking, all right, well, we need to make sure we're going at Little John on pick and rolls all night, or hey, we need to make sure we're pulling Litsky away from the rim as much as we can with our actions. If I'm Evangel, I'm trying to pull Litsky out and get him in flare screen actions where he's having to guard all the flares and the slips and things like that. So the same thing when you're watching, when I watch Purdue play, everybody tries to just get him in pick and roll situation and try to pull ED away from the rim so they can get to the rim and create mismatches. But that's really what it's about. It's knowing your team really well, and then trying to exploit mismatches against other teams and trying to put their good players in tough situations. So
easier said than done with that strategy, right?
Very easy. You can game plan it up all you want. You got to have guys that can go out there and execute it and get the job done. So, but that just starts in practice and with reps. And older teams are always a little bit more experienced and are used to doing it and are able to adjust on the fly because they've seen it all before if they've been together 2 to 3 to 4 years. So it's yeah, it's not an easy thing. If it was easy, everybody would do it, Tim.
And that's kind of what you were hinting at when we started, is what was tough at the beginning of the year, and you even mentioned this on this show a couple of times. The word that we kind of kept coming back to was identity. And if you as a coach and as a coaching staff have been together or certainly at one place for a while, you have the ability to bring your own identity, your own game plan, your own desires and goals to a new team, because obviously, as we know, that the team shifts every year. But then if you've got personnel, administration, but also players that have been a part of that for a while, they already have that buy-in. They already know what your desires and expectations are, so you don't have to, I don't want to say waste time, but you don't have to spend time working on that. Once the season starts, you've already got it. So that is hard, I feel, to build with a team with a bunch of transfers, which we certainly see at the Elite Eight this year in Division I men's basketball. There were a lot of teams with a lot of transfers, kind of par for the course, but that was what you guys were dealing with as well. And all of that is awesome to bring in people with different backgrounds and experience, different lived experiences. I think is a really cool thing about what we do here, but it is hard to translate that into one single identity. And once you have time to do that, that gets easier.
Yep, and it'll, we had some guys that transferred out, and we have a few that graduated this year. But, we still have a good group coming back, a group that's been through a whole preseason with us, been through a whole season with us. So, that those first 2 weeks of practice is everybody's just trying to learn terminology and what this drill is. And, so we're going to go 33-2 shooting. Like, I don't know what that is. Sure. Everybody's looking around, Now we've got, we'll have 7 to 8 guys that are returning that, hey, this drill, boom, we're right in it. Hey, we're going to go through our secondary progression, and you don't have guys looking around going, I don't know what's going on. So, it'll be easier. Those guys will be able to help along the transfers and the freshmen that are in, and stuff it'll flow a little bit faster. So hopefully we can get into more situational stuff with this team a little bit sooner than, I felt like all the way up through Christmas we were still just teaching a lot of the stuff. So hopefully, we'll have 7 or 8 guys that know what they need to be doing. It's just then correcting the little things or putting them in situations to kind of be able to play out those scenarios. Where this year we just felt like we were teaching it all year long, and then at different times it would click. And but now everybody's done it for a year. So I think even with the transfers coming in, it's as long as you have a good group of 4 or 5 guys that have done it before and can kind of lead the way through practices, it just makes everything flow a little bit more, and you get a lot more done. So you look at some of those teams in the Final Four, there's 2 or 3 of those starters that have been there for 2 or 3 years that, just know the expectations. And if you just plug 1 or 2 guys in, it's a lot easier to get those 2 guys up to speed than it is 9, 10 guys up to speed.
Well, I know that the road wasn't always smooth for you, but I also know that this was a personal goal of yours to be a head coach at a 4-year school, and you have achieved that. So congratulations on that. We're proud of you for all the work that you guys did and everything that you achieved this year. Congratulations.
Appreciate it. We'll keep working and keep putting a good product out there.
We're looking forward to seeing that for sure. That is head men's basketball coach Tyler Bredehoeft as he officially finishes his first year as our head men's basketball coach at Avila University. You're watching Eye on the Eagles. We'll be right back with head baseball coach Matt Carpenter right after this.
against Oakwoo when we thought we were playing York on Tuesday. Probably something pretty similar to that. Empson's making it tricky, though. He's throwing really well.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, I would say he has...
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to this April Fool's Day edition of Eye on the Eagles. I'm Tim Hackett, now joined by head baseball coach Matt Carpenter. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
And congratulations on a really good recent run of success for you and your team. I know you know this already, but Avila baseball is off to its best start in KCAC play since the team has been part of this conference. You have helped author the best start that the team has experienced. How does that feel?
It feels good. I've kind of told the guys, hey, we have won more games and more conference games than we've ever won since we got into the tournament. We're pretty early in the season to be to have already set that mark. I think it does go to show that we had a long way to go. Going back and looking and reviewing against some of our past records in the conference. Not a lot of numbers that we're tremendously proud of in there, but there's nothing we can do about that now. All we can do is try to move forward, and our goal was to be the best, to be the most successful team we'd had in the conference, and we've reached that goal. But there's still definitely more goals on the table. But as far as for where we are in the season, we're pretty happy with what we've achieved so far.
So that was a conscious goal that you guys had, was to kind of keep. I mean, obviously you've been a large piece of what our recent history in this program has been. So you know that very well. So was that a conscious goal of yours going into this year?
It was, in the sense that I knew that we absolutely would have to do that to reach any other goals. 9 was our high water mark for a single season, which we had actually done the last 2 years. But like thinking towards, we haven't made any real secrets about the fact that our goal is to get to the conference tournament. And I mean, 9 wins is obviously not going to get you there. But I'm definitely a person, and I'm sure that in a team our size, we have a lot of guys that are like this, and not some guys that aren't too, but I'm definitely a person that likes to kind of enjoy the journey and enjoy like the little steps along the way. So, 10 wins was double digits, and the first time that we got to 10. And so that was definitely like check box, or the first box to check. And so I was excited to get to that. And then there's, 15 will be nice, and if we can get to that, and then 18 would be nice if we can get to that. And so I like to check boxes along the way. But to answer your question, I mean, I think really just going in saying, I mean, you're not going to get to Great Bend with 9 wins. So and we're at 13 right now, which is great, and that's actually matches the number that we won in our first 3 seasons in the KCAC, which granted one of those seasons was shortened by COVID, but still. So we've experienced more success than what we've experienced in the past, but we haven't done enough to get where we want to go yet. So that's kind of the next goal.
You're on pace for that at the moment. You're in the top 5 in the conference as we stand here on this Monday morning, and I believe we know for a fact that 8 teams will make the postseason tournament now. I believe that's
correct.
I believe that's official. I've been kind of tiptoeing on that the last couple of weeks, so you heard it here first. So regardless, you were on pace to make that field, which, as you've said, is your goal. It hasn't been easy over the last couple of weeks, but you guys have shown a really impressive bit of resolve and determination. You've won 2 series over the last 2 weekends to give you a total of 5 now on the campaign, which is also the most that the team has won since you've been part of the KCAC. Not a surprise to see those 2 marks go hand in hand, obviously. But
Sure. I mean, and that's always the goal every weekend when you go out, is to win the series. Sweeps are so hard to come by in this league, even for teams that are perennially at the top of the standings and go to Great Bend year after year. Sweeps are just not that easy to come by. So when you start out the series every weekend, you're looking for the series win. Now, against Friends, we did not put ourselves in a position to sweep, but we did put ourselves in a position to sweep a couple of times this year. Against Evangel, I believe we did, and then against I'm blanking. McPherson this past weekend. And we weren't able to seal the deal either one of those times. And, it's funny, I was talking to the assistant coaches after the game on Saturday, after the 3rd game. You go and you win the first game. If you're to go into a weekend, you win game 1, you lose game 2, and you win game 3, you're leaving hey, great weekend. You go out, you win game 1, game 2, and then you lose game 3. You're like, oh, man. Well, and it's funny because it's the same result, right?
Yeah.
When we won the first 2 at Evangel, and it was actually a similar story both times. We won the first 2 and then got off to a lead in game 3. In game 3 in Evangel, I thought we kind of let our guard down a little bit and kind of beat ourselves. I don't really think that was the case this Sunday. I think we still were cognizant of what we were doing, and McPherson just came back and got a couple of big hits at bad times for us. But I thought it was more about them than us on this past Sunday. But yeah, 5 series wins, that's great, man. And that's again with that goal to be in Great Bend, you're kind of starting to see them. You've got those teams at the top of the standings that are kind of pulling away a little bit. Some teams that are separating themselves towards the bottom of the standings a little bit. That middle is going to get pretty crowded. And right now I feel like we have some tiebreakers over some of the teams that are probably going to be in that middle that hopefully is where we're going to be also. So those are really big wins for us, not just to win the series, but to set us up for if anything gets really tight down the road.
Let's talk a little bit more about McPherson this past weekend because, as we know, that has been typically one of the better teams in the conference. Their offense this year is still very good, even with a lot of guys departing and a couple of guys absent from this past weekend, which I don't know why that was, but they had a couple of regulars that weren't playing for various reasons. Their pitching staff has struggled this year, and you can just see it by their numbers, and that kind of bore out this weekend as well. Their offense competed. They actually scored more runs than we did after how Saturday finished, just 2, so it wasn't anything lopsided, but their offense picked it up, but you guys were able to tamper them down when it mattered, early in game 1, late in game 2, and then came back for another slugfest on Saturday. Your offense certainly came to the party as well, so it seemed like everything lined up the way that you guys wanted to, more or less, given what you were telling me going into the series. You were lining it up to win, to set yourself up as best as you could for games 1 and 2, and that's exactly what you guys achieved.
Yeah, and it's kind of a we won game 1 and what is becoming, last year our game 1s were a lot of Jarrett Dotson would hand the ball to Jack Dotter and then we'd go from there. We would win game 1 a lot and then struggle the rest of the series. Our game 1s have kind of, for the most part, been more of our slugfest, and not necessarily even from a points total, but just the 2 teams butting each other's heads. And then we've had more of our standout pitching performances later in series throughout the year. But game 1 this past weekend was a typical game 1 for us, right? And then game 2, an extra. Did we? Yeah, we went extra innings. Yeah, a thriller there. Another walk-off win for our guys. I'm starting to think, like, man, let's just set the whole series up to get Colby up to the plate with a chance to walk it off. Like, maybe that's our formula, but
it's worked plenty of times already.
Yeah, tough game. Definitely a lot of grit in that game on the part of both teams. I know there's teams that both teams felt like they had a chance to win it, but like really in going back to game one, Cashin Schranz comes out, gives us a workmanlike performance, and then he has to leave with some discomfort. And man, Corbin Hammond really stepped up and came in and threw some. His line won't look as good as he pitched, but you're sitting there. You got a veteran guy coming out early, and you're handing the ball to a true freshman who's already pitched some big innings for you. But you're still kind of like, oh boy, this one might get away from us a little bit. And Corbin just proved, as he has in a couple other situations, that he's ready. And he's not always going to get the job done, but because nobody does. But he was there, he was ready, and he got the job done for us, and just continued to keep us in the game and help give us a chance to win. It was good to see Jack Dotterer get back on the mound for a couple batters. He's been injured a lot this year, but kind of trying to shake that rust off. And then Connor Thompson comes in and pitches as well as I've seen him pitch all season. And then game two, Walton struggled a little bit early, which has not happened much this year. And Logan Impson, who I had told Logan going into the weekend, I was like, hey, you're our number 3 starter this weekend. You'll start game 3 unless we need you before that. If we feel like we have a win or a chance to win a baseball game, we might come get you then out of the pen. My hope was kind of maybe like game 1, maybe we need him for the 9th and still be able to use him a little bit for game 3. But with Walton leaving early, I was like, let's just go straight to it. Let's get this thing. We can win this series today if we can win this game. So we kind of pushed all our chips to the middle of the table in game 2, and Logan was just brilliant, just absolutely brilliant, and got the job done for us. So that was huge. And then, like I said, I thought they played really well on Sunday. But the funny thing about this league and how tight everything is, I'll guarantee you they got back on that bus and felt like they should have won that series. Guarantee it. So, but Logan Impson was absolutely huge for us this weekend, along with some other guys. But that performance that he gave us that's probably the difference in the series.
I couldn't agree more, and it was as good as we have seen him. Mm-hmm. And like you were hinting at earlier, given the situation, given some of the circumstances, and the fact that a series win was on the table at that point, it was as good of a performance as we've seen from anybody. Obviously, Walton, I think, has still probably had your best overall game, maybe your best 2 overall games on the season. Cash has had 1 or 2 really good games as well. Logan has also had 1 or 2 really good games. But all things considered, this certainly has to be up there. That's why he's my nominee for Pitcher of the Week in the conference this week, because of how well he did. The numbers bear that out, but then also kind of the situation around that. And he more than gave you guys the chance to win, and ultimately Bryson Landon give you guys the win with the walk-off hit in the bottom of the 8th, but don't get to that point if Logan doesn't do as well as he did.
And also, I mean, on top of all of it is the selflessness of it. Dude's pitched good enough to be a starter. Yep. Like, no doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt about it. But he knows where we are in our season. He knows how big these games are for us. And that's one hallmark of this team. I mean, excuse me. We saw even over the last couple series, we've seen Landon Bailey at first base a couple of times. Who wants to play first base when you're a college shortstop, right? But that's what we needed, and that's where he needed to be, and that's where we needed him to be. And same with Logan Impson. Like, everybody wants to be a starting pitcher, right? If you're not going to be a starting pitcher, you want to be like a real closer and like wear that title as a closer, which he closed it, but that's not the title he was wearing. He was wearing the, hey, we're going to maybe throw you as a starter, maybe in relief sometime, just whatever we need kind of guy. And he was absolutely willing to take that role and go out and do it. So the performance was fantastic, and I'll always remember how big that performance was at the time that we needed it. But the selflessness of it is something that I really appreciate from him, and I think says a lot about him as a kid.
What is it like then? And I guess he would be the best person to ask, but as a pitcher, you know that you don't have that set role. As a reliever, you now grow to understand that, all right, in a weekend series, I could be used at any point or maybe at multiple points over the weekend. As a reliever, I think I understand that. As a starter, I'm probably knowing maybe the day or two before I'm pitching in this game, and then obviously likely not pitching in any other game. So those two groups more or less have their identity and can get their mentality set at that point. But if you're somebody like Logan was this weekend, or somebody else like we've seen over the past few years with this team, which we'll talk about later, where you don't know exactly what your role is. You know I will be pitching at some point over these 3 games, but I don't know when, how long, against whom, what the score is, anything like that. What does your mentality have to be? What does your approach have to be? How do you handle that to set yourself up for success?
You know, I mean, I don't know how much of an expert I would be on this because, like you and I have talked before, the last time I pitched, I was 14.
Me too, don't worry.
But to me, I think, and I think this is important for any guy that's not in the starting lineup, no matter what position they play, but I think especially for pitchers and catchers, you got to be really locked into the game. Watching the hitters, and knowing, excuse me, I could have to go at any time. What's this guy doing? What did this guy see in his last at-bat? I would think that there's a lot of mental preparedness that goes into it, as well as like physically. And he just kind of has to trust us as far as like when to get up and when to start moving physically and get his body going, which was tough, honestly, Tim. Who would? Again, Walton's been so good for us all year. I would not have anticipated going to Logan that early, and I'm sure Logan didn't anticipate it either. Especially we were scoring. And so, you try not to get too far ahead of yourself, but, we're scoring a little bit early. We got Walton on the mound, and I'm starting to think in the back. I'm trying my best to push these thoughts out of my head, but I'm like, man, we might be able to start Logan tomorrow. And, Logan's thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
so
we were too up in the booth. I can tell you that.
But, I think it's just like that, staying locked into the game from the mental part of it, watching what they're doing to guys, and which I think he's going to be doing anyway, whether he's going to be pitching the next day but – a lot of it just comes down to trusting, that our pitching coach, Ty Cody, is going to kind of guide him through our thinking and all that. But I think you probably have a mindset of, hey, I'm thinking this could be his last batter at any time. So I would think would be kind of the mindset on that.
The other thing that I really enjoy, I think, in this sport and also softball is true for other sports as well. And we just had TB on the show, and I think you can see this, in a basketball season as well. What I'm referring to is players' roles change. That's just the safest word to use as the year goes on. I think in your sport, and I think you can attest to this from how I know you've approached your lineup over the last couple of years, you'd love to have a set lineup, a starting 9 or 10 or 11 maybe that you're going to likely go to. Some teams are maybe a little bit more fluid. Some teams have to be more fluid based on personnel or whatever. But I feel as what we've seen now over the course of this year is pitchers' roles change, and I'm sure they don't always love that, but I know that you and I can both speak to this from our favorite professional teams. You would love to have, the full season where you've got, all right, here are my starters, here's my seventh inning guy, 8th inning guy, 9th inning guy, and that's their role, and that's going to be their role until, maybe they get hurt or whatever the case is, and we have to change things up. But this is my approach. This is my game plan. This is what I would want in an ideal world for a full season, however many games it is. But that's not the reality. And what we've seen is that pitchers' roles have changed, and they continue to fluctuate as the year goes on. And I know it's not always fun for all of them, but it is interesting to see from my perspective, somebody as somebody who's slightly removed from it all, to see different people step into those roles. And I think that is exciting compared to years past where we have to, and I've certainly lived this with other baseball teams as well, where you have to keep going to the same relievers even though you don't necessarily feel confident that they're going to get the job done, but you have to keep going to them because you don't have anybody else. That's not the situation that you're in right now, and you've been able to go with quote-unquote other guys that we didn't see in featured roles at the start of the year, even talking about the starting pitchers, and now we've seen them evolve into bigger roles or at least different roles than they had at the start of the year. Corbin is a prime example. Austin Rogers is another example. The list goes on, and that to me is exciting to see people jump in and more or less excel in those different roles that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, sometimes it's exciting for me when they're excelling. Other times when we're having to think outside the box, it's not as exciting for me when things are not going well. But those guys, and one thing that we've done a little bit differently over the last couple of weeks is, it's no secret that we were kind of struggling in our bullpen a couple weeks ago. Early on in the season, it's a baseball season, right? We're 3 series I think into the season, and our bullpen has been pretty lights out.
Yeah,
and our team batting average is like 194. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we go on a stretch where you can almost write us down for 8 runs, for scoring 8 runs a game, and our bullpen starts to struggle a little bit. It's the ebb and flow of baseball, right? But as a coach, you're trying different things, right? If something's not working, like when our lineup wasn't working early in the year, we moved some things around, and so then later on in the year, that's going pretty well. So we're kind of leaving that how it is, and then we're struggling in the bullpen, so we try to make some moves. And one of the moves that we kind of made a couple weeks ago was we have a lot of young arms in this pen. Corbin, Austin, even Holton Miller's a young guy from an experience standpoint. Jordan Rugg is coming off just getting healthy from injury, another freshman. And we kind of made the decision of like, hey, these guys have a whole lot of upside. They're younger. And we've kind of been leaning on the guys with experience a little bit, but maybe it's time to kind of push some of these younger guys more to the forefront, which is what we've done. And it's been exciting, and it's worked as much as it hasn't so far. And so, and then again, like seeing like the whole, again, we're struggling a little bit in the bullpen. So maybe we need to take one of those arms out of the rotation that's doing really well. And just add some quality innings, add them as a safety net for quality innings later in the game, and then that's going to open up a starting spot, right? And that gives you the look. We know it's a KCAC, so we know we're down for at least one 15 to 12 game every weekend. So, you're kind of saying, hey, man, give you a spot start. Could you give me 4 innings and give up 6 runs? We'll probably still be in the game, But it's also allowed us to do is it kind of audition those younger guys for potential starting spots down the road. And with the gauntlet of games that we have coming up, we've got 9 games in 11 days coming up. Like, you can't ride 3 starters through that. So it is. I'm hoping it'll pay dividends down the road too, with all those guys having experiences in different roles.
I wanted to talk about that upcoming slate for sure because. Kind of the give and take of it, something that you and I have talked about both on air and off over the last couple of weeks, is knowing if you have, you've got more games coming up, obviously, until you get to your last game on the schedule. And even then, we're assuming there might be some more added on at the end of the year.
Hopefully.
But my point is that you've got a certain number of games coming up in the next little window, and that has to change how you approach the games that you've got coming up immediately, which is what you and I talked about the last time you were on the show. But for better or for worse, you haven't had to deal with that side of it as much over the last couple of weeks because you haven't had to play on Tuesdays. And that was something that was a conversation that we had on air during the Friends series is we knew that they didn't have a Tuesday game coming up the following week after they got through our series against you guys, so they could, in theory, approach things differently knowing that we don't have to maybe save 2 or 3 arms for Tuesday. That's also something that you guys have now dealt with over the last couple of weeks, but it's not something that you will get to or maybe have to deal with over the next couple of weeks because you have a lot of midweek games lined up. So that makes what you've got in front of you that much more difficult, right?
It does. I mean, difficult's a good word for it. If I'm in a good mood, it's challenging or exciting. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be – I'm trying to recall a time where we've had this many innings facing us in this short of an amount of time, and I can't really think of that. So we're just going to have to sit down where, again, we're going to have to be creative. And try to set this thing up. And I really think what it really comes down to is you try to look at your staff and see how can we set this thing up to give us the best chance possible in the most games possible, and then some guys are gonna step up in other roles or they're in other games, or they're not going to step up in other games, and we're going to see how it goes. We talked a little bit before we came on air about we'll probably approach this weekend against Tabor very similar to how we approached the Oklahoma Wesleyan series earlier in the year, where we thought, we were going to have a Tuesday game coming up, and we'll probably approach it pretty similar, but it'll be interesting. You never know how those first couple games go. You never know, and I mean, you even try to lay it out from like an inning standpoint, but what if Cashin goes out there and pitches 5 innings and it's 100 pitches, or what if he goes out there and pitches 5 innings and it's 62 pitches?
Sure.
So we'll have to. I'm sure we'll have something that we write up that is our map and our plan, and I'm also sure that won't be the way that it goes down. But we're gonna do our best. And I told the guys the other day, it seems like a daunting task to have, but I was like, dude, what would you really rather do than play 9 baseball games in 11 days? If you can think of something that sounds more fun, let me know. But it'll be a good time. I tell the guys, and I've been telling the guys this ever since a couple seasons ago. We all love big games. But you earn the right to play in big games. The better we play, the more big games we get to play in. You know, if we were, 13-9 in the conference right now? You know, if we were 7 and whatever that would be.
I can't do the math either.
Yeah, me 7 and if we were 7-15, these games this weekend wouldn't be that big.
Sure.
But they are big because they've put themselves in a position to make them big games. And so we get to hopefully play in 9 big games over an 11-day stretch and see what happens.
Let's flash back a couple of weeks ago because those were certainly big games against Friends. I was on the broadcast for all 3, so I kind of always feel like I'm, front and center on the conversation with it, at least immediately after things happen. And I know you and I have both been part of days like Friday, and we've been a part of days like Friday already a couple of times this year. And then James Russell and I were on the call for the doubleheader on Saturday, and you know me, I'm usually a bit, staid. I try to not get super emotional about anything. And as soon as you guys won Game 2, the first game on Saturday, James says, this is the biggest win of the year for the team. And my initial thought was, all right, let's slow your roll here. We've got, another 20 games left in the season. There's going to be bigger games. And that might be true, but literally as soon as I said that, I started backtracking myself, and I told him, even when we were doing our post-game roundup, I said, I think you're right. Given how the past week had gone, given the opponents, and given the quality of victory, and there ended up being 2 victories that day, but we hadn't even got to that point yet. But we were thinking after that, he said immediately after that game, biggest game of the year for the team so far, and I pretty quickly came around to his line of thinking, considering what had happened on Tuesday, considering what had happened on Friday, considering the fact that you just got through a series against Oklahoma Wesleyan over the previous week, likely top team in the conference, then take a win off of Friends on that Saturday afternoon and turn that around into 2 wins off of Friends later on that day. I was quickly in line with his line of thinking that those were the 2 biggest games of the year so far.
I would have a hard time arguing against that. That Tuesday game against York was just, it's hard for me to remember any games that I've been a part of that were more heartbreaking than that game. Massive, drop in emotion and everything. And then I thought after that, and I was even talking to Sean, and Sean was kind of like, well, after something like that, usually, you kind of go one of 2 ways. You either circle the wagons or everything kind of folds. And I was like, there's not a lot of quit in this team. You say a lot of things about these guys, but there's not a lot of quit in them. And I don't think there was quit in them on that Friday game against Friends. There was just a bad baseball game in them that Friday against Friends. And, and they beat us every which way but Sunday on that one. And it was a tough – we had a real reckoning in the clubhouse afterwards. Not like like screaming and yelling and cussing or anything like that, but just like gut check time. What are we here for? What do we? We're gonna have to dig a little bit deeper. And as they have done every time this year where something has happened on or off the field, when it was gut check time, I kept using the word, they answered the bell. I sent them, most people, I think I managed to work this into most of my appearances on here. I love Rocky Balboa. And I sent them a picture in the group me that morning of Rocky Balboa. Said, it's not the knockdowns that define us. And, these guys, the reason that I love these guys and that I feel like maybe these guys and me are a good fit together is these guys answer the bell. You're not going to win every time, but I told them after the game, Friends has something to say tomorrow about whether we win or not, but they have absolutely nothing to say about whether we show up. And they showed up, and it shouldn't surprise me at this point, because like I said, we've had our fair share of obstacles, as everybody does,
Sure.
as everybody does on and off the field, but they repeatedly show up. And so they did, and we were able to get to, biggest wins of the year. I like I said, I think I'd probably have to agree with that, but those might be the biggest wins we've had in a few years. And you kind of saw him carry that moxie out there again on this past weekend. And it's not just it's not like the moxie or the I think they get it now. Like they get it. They can win series in this conference. Like if they don't get that now, then they're dumb because they have enough times.
Got it. You've shown it by now.
But I think it was just that whole we've been here before, you know. And so I think that there's a little bit of, you know, I don't know. There's just that resilience that they have that it just makes them continue to show up. And then when that game 2, like I didn't know we were going to win game 2. You know, I mean it's a close game, but like I was not surprised when they did, and I think in the past I would have been, and I think in the past they would have been, to be honest with you. And they're not going to do it every time, you know, but they know they can. They know they can, and that's I think that's what helps them. That's what helps them show up. But ultimately, they learned that they could do things by showing up and answering the call, and they're really good about doing that.
I think that is something that I have learned this year as well, and I've said it on air, and I try on broadcast on the live stream, and I try to couch this by saying I'm not trying to insult previous players or coaches or anything that we've had on the team before, but. Just like, look, the reality for me, having not been a player on the team, just been an observer over the last couple of years, and feel free to correct me if you think this is being too on the nose, but like these games that we have seen, and even the games that the team has not won just over the last couple of weeks, we would have not seen performances like that from this program over the last couple of years. I think it's that easy. Even that game against York, which, as you said, massive change of events. They come back and take the lead in the ninth. Y'all loaded the bases in the bottom of the ninth. Ended up not coming through, but like you said, you literally are not going to be able to do it every single time. But you go down by 3 after being up big. Most teams, I think it's fair to say, would have kind of conceded that emotionally, if not literally. But that's not what happened. Again, you guys loaded the bases, had the tying run on base, weren't able to bring them in. It's not going to happen every time. And then after that game against Friends on Friday, everything kind of worked out extremely well with a lot of different things on those next 2 days. And then the game 2 this past weekend against McPherson, crazy back-and-forth game early. Both teams are scoring, like you said, even with really good pitchers on the mound. And then, both pitching staffs are able to settle things down as the game goes on. That game became a toss-up for me as a viewer, and a lot of the times over the last few years, those toss-ups just seem to go the other way or not land on the side of the coin that has our logo on it. And regardless of whether the fact that we've got a new logo on that coin now or not, it's coming up on your side more than it has in the past. And to me, that is exciting. And like you said, after what we saw last year with all those walk-off wins to kind of set the table and set the tone, maybe I shouldn't be as surprised as I feel like we are after winning a game like Game 2 this past weekend, but I'm less surprised and just more the emotion that I'm coming up with is proud. Like, it's fun to see these guys come through, and I'm just happy for you guys that it's happening more than it had been.
Proud's a great word. I'm immensely proud of this group of guys, immensely proud. Besides my faith in my family, I can't think of anything I'm more proud of than this group of guys. They're just they're what we needed as a program. That's just what I'll say. Is this group of guys is what we needed. They believe in each other. They believe in themselves. I think they believe in their coaches. If they don't, they do a good job of faking it. Like you said, you're never going to always come out on the winning side, but you can always control whether you're going to give in or whether you're going to keep coming back and keep fighting, and almost always they do. They do.
Big fight coming up this weekend. Avila takes it on the road again for a road series against Tabor, one of the top teams of the KCAC. As always, they seem to be a well-built team this year. Good offense, good pitching, good conditions that seem to favor them when they play at home. Yeah. That's kind of always how it goes. So Tabor will be a tough test for the Eagles this weekend. That's coming up scheduled this Saturday and Sunday. Light week of home events here at Avila. We've got varsity softball on Wednesday afternoon. That is a big game for the team that plays on that end of the Z. The Eagles take on Ottawa, preseason KCAC favorites. Those Eagles are currently the top team in the KCAC, so it's current number 1 versus preseason number 1. That is this Wednesday at 2 and 4 p.m. Avila against Ottawa. Then this Sunday we have our dance and cheer national send-off before they get ready to compete in their national championships in about 10 days or so. So that is this Sunday afternoon at Maybe Fieldhouse. Stay tuned for more details about that. So we've got varsity softball at home on Wednesday, cheer and dance national send-off at home on Sunday. Baseball is on the road this Saturday and Sunday at Tabor. And as always, you can find all the details on how to follow along and watch on our website, avilaathletics.com. That is going to do it for this episode of Eye on the Eagles. We will be right back here, same time, same channel, live on the Avila Sports Network and later on YouTube next Monday morning. Thanks as always to Tanners at Redbridge for hosting us. Thanks as always to my team for helping make this thing happen. And thank you to you for watching. That is head baseball coach Matt Carpenter. I've been Tim Hackett. We will see you next time on Eye on the Eagles. Until then, happy April Fool's Day and so long.